Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 6 of flying the Airbus A320. This has definitely been a heck of a fun adventure here, and we're finally going to put this thing down on the ground. One thing I do want to say about this aircraft before I attempt to land this thing is you have to be very, very careful with it. The fly-by-wire system is very sensitive to negative Gs. So if you ever find yourself needing to push the nose down, you're going to need about twice as much force as you probably think you're going to need. That's just a general warning, because it's one of those things that always tests me. Another thing you want to watch out for is because we are a fly-by-wire, when you give this little tiny handle a tug, you're basically going to be calling up how many G-forces you want for a particular maneuver. If you crank on it, yeah, it's going to build it up. Returning this thing back to neutral is what's going to tell it that to hold it at that position. So when you're approaching, what you're going to find yourself doing basically is kind of basically balancing the need to go ahead and put the nose down versus the need to go ahead and set the power. That's why I recommend when you're first learning to fly this aircraft, use your instrument approaches. They're going to make your life much simpler. As you feel comfortable with that, this is going to sound crazy, fly this aircraft through the pattern a bunch of times to kind of get the hang of it. This will be a bit of an experience for those of you who are new to flying, especially fly-by-wire. People coming from Boeing aircraft or even, some of the other aircraft like, the Learjet and stuff like that. We don't have a Learjet. The Longitude, for example, it's going to be a different experience. So it is going to take a little bit, and don't be surprised if I'm a little rough on it. Okay, so last time we basically got everything set up. Our approach has been pre-selected. Decision altitude is selected. ILS is selected. Our navigation radio has already pre-selected everything we need to do. So what we need to do is we need to pop over here. We need to go ahead and turn on our ILS display. So let's take a look what this is going to tell us. Over here on the right side, this tells us our glide slope. As you can see, we're a bit high. Over down here, this is going to tell us, or basically a localizer, how far to the left or right. Now, for this particular approach, it's taking us on a DME arc, and it's going to take a very aggressive left turn at the end, which is going to line us up. We're not actually going to get any good usable ILS signal until we take this left corner here, which is why I'm not activating the approach mode until we get a little bit closer to where we need to be. One thing we do need to do, though, is we need to go ahead and get ourselves to the appropriate altitude. So I notice R270, let's see what they're asking us for as far as our appropriate altitude. 270, there it is. They don't give us a specific altitude, but they say Romeo 305 should be 4,000 feet. So I'm actually going to select it altitude mode. I'm going to take the control away from the computer. And notice now it says open descent. So if I want this aircraft to descend, I can go ahead and pull the throttle all the way back and get it coming down a little bit quicker. So now that that's set up, there's a couple housekeeping items we need to go ahead and take care of real fast. The first things first is we want to select our auto brake. I'm going to select the medium option here. We want to make sure anti-skid is turned on. Coming down here, we want to arm our speed brakes, which is pretty straightforward. We just grab onto them and go chunk and grab it. This is going to pull a little detent out, which is going to pull them back automatically. The reversers are simply a button I have on my joystick. I have to mash them to go ahead and flip them back. Next thing we want to do is we want to confirm our landing lights are in the correct position. We want to go ahead and flick some lights in the back to let we're going to land. That's really irritating, but it's kind of fun anyway. Boo, boo. That's just me having fun. Next thing you know, we want to go ahead and get our approach speed. What is our approach speed going to be? Well, let's go down here and take a look. Perf. And I can see here our approach speed is going to be 154. Now remember, with approach speeds, you always want to add 5 knots or the wind, depending on what the component is. In this case, our wind is actually fairly calm, so I'm going to leave it at 154 today. Normally, we'd use 159, and if I needed to come in here and manually override that, I just type in the value that I want, click right there, and boop, I'm all set. And unfortunately, we don't have the ability to tell the computer that, hey, we want to use a full flaps approach, which is kind of a bummer here. We'd mash this button to do that. So we're not going to get that benefit, but we are going to get our approach speed. If you had a gust factor, you'd always want to add half the gust. So let's say my winds are gusting to 10. We could go ahead and add 5 to this, which would give us an approach speed of 164. At the end of the day, it's basically going to be the same ground speed you're going to be hitting the ground at, not necessarily the same air speed. So that's just something you want to kind of be mindful of. Okay, so now what our aircraft is going to do is it's going to take this last turn. It's time to start getting us down to our approach speed. Generally, when I take this last turn, I like to get my speed down to 210, which I believe is an airliner turn. Again, I'm not an ATP, so I can't speak to it exactly. But basically, it's going to be that kind of almost like minimum speed is what you'll hear them say, or minimum speed before you have to start putting flaps down. Usually 210, 205 is kind of that speed. It's nice for us because we're still very, very, very heavy, even though we've flown a pretty good distance all the way out from Lake Maracaibo that we got this entire adventure kind of kicked off on here. So we're slowing down. Again, I've got this on managed mode right now. Actually, not managed. I've got it on selected mode because I'm taking control. Keep in mind, air traffic control can give you 1,001 different instructions, which can interfere with all your hard work here. So it's critical. You can see our runway sitting there right off the left. Conditions are much better than they were when I originally set this up this morning. We had really, really, really nasty weather. One thing I'm noticing, though, is as as I'm slowing down, my nose is starting to creep upward. And you also notice I got this little teeny tiny yellow line here, which is giving me this is usually what our actual speed is going to be. So we're kind of getting a little nasty here. And the fly-by-wire system is saying, hey man, you're getting close to stall speed. Can you do something about that? Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and slap down a notch of my flaps there, which should pop out the slats, which will make this a little bit more comfortable. See how the nose is bringing itself down. And now we're in a little bit better shape here. And you can see my entire slat popped out the front, which will give me a little bit better response. But unfortunately, look what it has done to us. Now our critical speed is like right there. You also notice now we've got this new little yellow bar around 200, saying that's going to be kind of our next new minimum speed. I'm going to go ahead and reduce it down to that one as well. I'm going to be kind of cautious here to 3. Come swinging down. We're going to take our turn in just a second, so I'm going to go ahead and engage my next notch of flaps. I'm going to go reach down here, click, pop it down to flaps 2. You're going to see the big angry red bar get even closer, and you're going to notice that my little orange bar going ahead and give me a heads up where my next notch of flaps is. This little green F says this is where our full flaps is, and if you actually come over here, you'll notice full flaps is allowed at 177 knots. So we're basically sitting right here on the edge of the red line, which I don't feel very comfortable about. So I'm actually going to go ahead and reduce my speed there down to 185 knots. Come down to 185. There we are. And the aircraft is going to start slowing down nice and neatly. We're taking our turn to do our ILS approach. What I'm going to do now is once I notice that we're underneath the glide slope, which is desired, and I also notice the fact that we're a little off the localizer, which is also desired, I'm actually going to come over here and press APPR. Now you'll notice the only light that came on is localizer, because this is the only thing that we're able to detect at this time. Remember, we set this up when we did all that flight plan work before. So that's all set, looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Generally, I put down my gear as well as my last notch of flaps when I have 1 dot above neutral as far as glide slope. So the moment this triangle bops this thing right here, we're going to go ahead and slap everything ready for our final approach here. So you can see there's my happy runway looking right down the end. In an ideal world, we could time this all so precisely that we basically don't have to touch the throttle the entire flight. That's always awesome, but you don't always get that benefit. All right, there is my landing gear and last notch of flaps. So we're going to go ahead and slap those both down. You can see my trim kicks in pretty much instantaneously. Landing gear comes down. We're just going to confirm that we get ourselves a bunch of green lights. You can see they're unlocked right now. Just give it just a moment. 3 green means our landing gear is down. We're now going to decelerate down to our approach speed, which, if you recall, is 159 knots. 159 V approach. All right. We're not using a full flap approach in this particular case. We're going to be using flaps 3 because it's the one that we have programmed in here. Give the engines a moment to kind of catch up. If you feel that the nose is really, really high on an approach, that's usually indicative of the fact that you did not select the appropriate approach speed. Ideally, we want to be fairly level with the ground. Like if I take a look real quickly down here, I notice I'm basically just a tiny millimeter over the top here, and my speed's actually fairly close, which is indicative of the fact that I have selected everything correctly. If your nose is up, you're going too slow. If your nose is down, you're going way too fast. Remember, this aircraft's fly-by-wire system will fight you to the death if you do not kind of get on top of it right away. So our approach speed is looking good. I'm not going to put down the last notch of flaps because we don't have the approach speed for it. 3 notches of flaps is going to be plenty. It's going to be perfectly stable. Unfortunately, we don't have the hugs, so we can't see the handy-dandy little... it's such a bummer. The hugs, by the way, is basically a little heads-up display that you can get in some Airbuses. So there's our little handy-dandy runway. We're perfectly stabilized. Just taking a look outside to make sure everything looks the way I want it to. Again, I can see my flaps in the correct position. I can see my landing gear down. My landing lights should be blinding me, which they are. Delightful. It feels kind of like we're frozen in space, doesn't it? Even though we're doing almost 165 knots. We're going faster than a Cessna with missing wings falling from the sky, basically, right now. Got my runway. Good time to start thinking about my missed approach procedure. A missed approach here. I'm going to go and take a look at my flight plan real fast. Flight plan, go up a couple notches. I believe the flight, it takes us up to 4,000. Oh, no, it's a lot higher than that. 5,000 feet is going to be my missed approach. I'm going to go ahead and dial that in real quick. Delightful. If I had to at any point too, I could come in here in a steel heading mode. I could even select the heading that I desire that I need to do. Right now, everything is beautiful. Our approach speed is 159 knots, which it looks like we're maintaining perfectly. Landing gears down, glide slope captured, localizer captured, speed captured. Now, the great thing about this aircraft is I can reach over here and shut the auto throttle off and manually dictate the control of the throttle, basically all the way down to the ground. The other thing you can do is you can just grab onto the throttle and pull it all the way back to 0, and that will also disengage the automatic throttle. If you actually look up, sorry about that trim, my bad. If you actually look at the side, there's a whole region of auto throttle here. And once you pull it below this notch, there is no automatic throttle. It's completely you. But other than that, this is the great thing about high fly-by-wire aircraft with high sensitivity controls and nice smooth automatic pilots is we basically get to sit here and enjoy the ride down. I wish we could kind of like do the classic thing that you did in other flight simulators, where you'd open up the back door and you go float and you kind of go sit on the wing and pretend you're playing passenger or something. But really, that's all there is to this. When you're doing these as manual landings, by the way, like I said, remember, pushing down, you're going to have to take more effort than pulling up. However, there will always be a slight delay in every control movement you make. So a lot of people get into this whoa, 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 whoa kind of PIO, pilot-induced oscillation kind of problem that you're going to run into time and time again during those practice approaches. Okay, since this is a full instrument landing system approach, the only thing we have to worry about is pulling the throttles back and giving the controls a gentle, teeny, tiny tug for the flare when we get down here. The great thing about this airplane is it's going to insult our intelligence, and that's going to be a reminder that it's time to go ahead and pull the throttles back. You also get a warning down here to that effect. Notice, by the way, we got this big ILS reminder up in the center. Notice our ground speed is set. Notice it doesn't detect any wind, even though we were told that there was wind. Yeah, that sounds like airliner problems. Okay, so my hand is on the throttle. So when it yells at us and questions our intelligence, we're going to go ahead and pull the throttle back, engage full reverse, and we're, of course, going to gently lift the nose up. Whoop, looks like we're loading in half of Bolivia at this particular point. Whoa, sorry about that. All right, we've got the city. It looks like a really nice, pretty hotel here. Hands on the controls. Normally what you could do is you could switch this into a manual approach, but like I was warning you, the fly-by-wire on this aircraft is fairly aggressive. It's going to end up being fighting us, especially since we didn't do the entire approach down to the ground on our own. So we're 160 knots. Looks like we're a little high, but the ILS says we're perfectly perfect. Our nose is at the exact perfect angle. Our speed is perfect. Flaps are ready, green. We've got this speed brake system armed. Like I said, I just pulled that back. This is real fun, and now we just have to wait until the aircraft questions our intelligence. Sounds funny, but you'll know what I mean. Notice it says the word land. Turn my volume up a little bit. I feel like we're high.
60, 50.
There it is. And what's up? Autopilot off. Oh! Full reverse. Sorry about that. Now, the automatic braking system is kicking in automatically. That's the point of it. And I've got this on reverse. Once you hit 80 knots, go ahead and cancel your reverse out. I think we got a lag spike at the last minute there. You'll notice my spoilers popped up just the way that they were supposed to. And I'm probably going to get some really angry glares from passengers when I do come in for a taxi this thing in, because they're going to be like, what was that? And that's when I'm like, that's what happens when the ILS and glide slope have not been properly configured for a given airport. But that's okay, because we did get safely down here on the ground, although I think I'm going to need back surgery after that. So, it happens. All right, go ahead and hold down the brake here. Man, that is bad timing when you get a lag spike right when you have to flare the airplane. Ah! All right, before we pull off, we want to make sure we shut off our strobe. We want to make sure we shut off both of our landing lights. And we want to go ahead and flip on all of our lovely taxi lights so that we can safely see where we're going back down to the ground. All right, now at this point, we're just going to make our way all the way back over to where we need to go ahead and park this aircraft. We've got a nice little gate waiting for us here. Obviously, when you're going to go ahead and cross one of these, you want to make sure you're not crossing anybody when you do that. That's kind of reckless and dangerous. One thing you do want to do when you're on the ground, though, is you want to go ahead and pop all that nastiness that you've created. I'm going to put my speed brakes back, make sure my automatic brake is shut off. We're going to look above our heads, and we're going to go ahead and activate our APU. The reason we're using our APU here is as soon as we shut off the aircraft, we're going to lose everything because both generators will basically die within moments of each other when you go ahead and get yourself down further for the landing. But you can see that we made ourselves a pretty safe flight. Our total flight time was pretty accurate. Our total fuel consumption, I think, was a little on the low side, but that's perfectly fine. Again, it's a function of who simulated what. Again, whenever you're crossing something like this, you get permission. You don't do what I'm doing right here. But again, just make it kind of easy. We're going to bring ourselves right around to the corner. Yeah, we're just going to find a nice little parking spot for us. And I don't see any gates for us, unfortunately. But welcome to Simón Bolívar. I see a bunch of little fuel kind of stations over on that side of things. And for something our size, I'm just going to go park right in front of the terminal, and we'll go ahead and do our quick little shutdown procedure. All right, as usual, remember the wheel's behind you, so turn late. Ooh, there we go. And that was actually a pretty smooth turn. I never get them that smooth. Yeah, I think half of my passengers are going to need back surgery after that one. That was a little weird, though, because it was doing like one of these versus one of these. That was kind of strange, I'm not going to lie, but that kind of thing happens. So it's just one of those things that, like, don't be afraid to take control. But if you're going to take control, remember that fly-by-wire will want to get in a fight with you. So you've got to take practice when it comes to taking control at the last second. All right, we'll go ahead and again, we're going to go wide, and then we're going to push that nose over. Remember, it's behind us. It's just a common mistake people make, especially when you transition to some of the bigger airliners as well. Come swinging around here. Ooh. Let's go park up here against the windshield. Hey, we're here. Oh, my pal. Imagine all the baggage and everybody's like, anything that's wrapped in like tissue paper that's glass. Oh, that's going to be nasty. All right, going to go ahead and hold down the brakes here. We're here. All right, going to go ahead and pop on the parking brake. Parking brake should be engaged. Awesome. So now this is easy. To shut the engines off, we click these two switches, and normally you get about 1,000 warning lights that all appear. And whoop, there we are. All right, hopefully this series has been helpful as at least to encourage you to try out the Airbus or one of the airliners. I personally prefer the Boeing airliners because they're a little bit more hands-on and a little easier to control kind of in those last emergencies. But again, they're both great aircraft and they're both worth checking out. Hopefully, like I said, this is helpful. Important thing to remember, though, is like I said, get all your stuff set up initially and it makes it a much easier and smoother experience. Enjoy.